Oh, I'm too short. There we go. Don't see too many short superheroes. As a young child growing up in the early 90s, I, like many of my peers, watched Power Rangers religiously. I wanted to be a Power Ranger when I grew up for a time. The picture on your order of service is me on my 5th birthday wearing a Power Ranger shirt. I collected toys, which I still have. I watched every episode. I won tickets to the movie, which my aunt described as torture, but I disagree. That movie was awesome, and it still is. And I even rented the direct-to-video Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Karate Club tapes. Although, I don't know how much of that was Power Rangers and how much I had a crush on Jason David Frank. My mother would not let me take karate, her reasoning being, you're going to hurt someone or yourself. She was probably not wrong. But still, I watched it whenever I got the chance, until Wishbone became more of a priority to watch, because literary dogs beat out punches every time. Still, when the recent Power Rangers movie was announced, I screamed along with my friends. I pouted at the casting and costume choices, and I went back to watching the Japanese versions that the Power Rangers take its footage from. When I did finally watch it, I was pretty much glued to the screen, and as one of our congregational members will attest to, I started screeching when the final scene hit. The Power Rangers were my superheroes. Some people grew up with Superman, some with Batman, some with Spider-Man, some with the X-Men, some with Dragon Ball Z. But superheroes, no matter what we call them, are our modern mythology. They represent the best in us and sometimes the worst. They are what we are called to be or to avoid. They are the modern retellings of some of our oldest stories. Stop me if you've heard this one before. A father from the heavens sends his son to earth, where he's raised by a normal family. The boy grows up and one day discovers his origins. He wanders around and falls in with a colorful cast of characters. He fights against evil and tries to teach values. One day, he finds an evil he cannot defeat and is killed saving people. A short time later, he is reborn to save us all. So yeah, it's Jesus, but it's also Superman. The latter part of that happened back in 1993 with Superman Volume 2, number 75, entitled Doomsday. I won't bore you with all of the details because most of you probably do not care. It was a shock to people since this wasn't really something that had been done to a comic book character this big ever. However, 5 months later, he was revived through a convoluted comic book process of nonsense. However, the issue he came back in, Action Comics number 687, for those of you who care, was even titled Born Again. Superhero writers are well aware of what they're doing. Their stories also reflect real-world issues, whether it's the Black Panther dealing with isolationism, or a character in X-Men's mother asking, have you tried not being a mutant? They deal with the questions of why do we fight as much as the special effects budget sometimes suggests the question is instead how do we fight? Some heroes fight for truth, justice, and the American way. Some superheroes fight only to protect those people they care about. Some fight for chimichangas. They are us as much as we are them. Representation, therefore, is extremely important in our superhero stories. If we cannot see ourselves in the stories, then we grow lonely and discouraged, and sometimes they think that there's something wrong with us. As an example, there are very few transgender superheroes. Most of the examples I could find are from non-Western media, and some of those depictions can be problematic. In terms of actually heroic characters, we have Allison Yeo, who I probably mispronounced, the current Batgirl's wife, who is the first modern major transgender character in a mainstream comic book, with the added bonus that, yes, we have a lesbian Batgirl. We have Loki, who, in accordance with mythology, can change gender and spent a significant time as a woman in the comics and seems comfortable with that. So we can chalk Loki up as gender fluid, but given the actions of Loki's in the comics, sometimes he's heroic, but I don't know if you really want to count Loki as a hero. We have Koi Boy, spelled B-O-I, who fights along Squirrel Girl, but Squirrel Girl is not generally considered a mainstream comic, even if she did once defeat Thanatos, which actually happened in a gag comic. There's Chalice, who is a transgender woman, but Chalice is pretty new and also not Marvel or DC, so most people don't know or care. The point is, there's not much out there, so what's a transgender kid to do when they're looking for superheroes? Where do underrepresented people go to find stories about themselves? It's a difficult question, and not one that's so simple to answer. The only real solution we have is to push for representation so the next generation doesn't have to feel the loneliness that the previous one felt. So we have to create them ourselves. We like to think of heroes as invincible, as impossible to take down, but that's simply not true. There's many times our heroes are brought down by an alien parasite, mind control, an all-powerful magical item, or simply bad writing. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about those in the real world, except bad writing, depending on your interpretation. But we do have to deal with the fact that we will fail, as well as the people we live up to. This, I think, is one of the greatest strengths of fiction. We're allowed to practice emotions and situations, dealing with feelings so that we can work with them reasonably once they come up in our real-world lives. It's like a vaccination. You deal with a small amount of this foreign invader, all of these feelings, so that you can handle it when you come face to face with it. Real-world heroes can be taken down too, as well. Sometimes it's by them dying, and sometimes it's by their own bad behavior. As an example, Lance Armstrong won many years of the Tour de France. He overcame cancer and kept going, despite the odds telling him that he shouldn't and that he should simply retire from racing. Unfortunately, as we all know, he cheated. He used performance-enhancing drugs to win his title and were stripped of them. However, that doesn't erase the good that he's done, inspiring people with cancer and other illnesses to keep going, even when people say they can't. Does he deserve to be punished for deceiving people? Absolutely. But even if someone does bad things, they can still have done good things. It's not a matter of the good and the bad canceling out. They can be treated as two separate things. There's a concept called death of the author. When an author puts out a creative work, the work should be allowed to stand on its own, and the author is irrelevant, as is the cultural context around the author. It comes from a 1967 essay by the French literary critic and theorist, who I'm going to butcher his name, Roland Barthes, of the same title. For those of us who like cultural context around our works, like me, this may sound discouraging, but he was actually arguing an important point. Quote, to give a text an author, end quote, and to say that something is definitely this meaning, he argues, is, quote, to impose a limit on that text, end quote. His argument is that we cannot understand with certainty what an author means. This concept, in my opinion, helps to separate some of my displeasure with some creators from their works. That doesn't mean I'll definitely still read or watch these works, because I don't want to contribute to the financial well-being of people that I think have hurt others. But if I already own something of theirs, it makes it easier to still take what lessons the things they have created have to teach, while not being immediately disgusted just by the thing's association with them. And this, too, is part of the journey of a hero, losing one's mentor or finding that they did something horrible, and yet heroes always stand up. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't always have to be successful in a traditional way, or at all. Heroes can fail and still be heroic. Remember, the person on their deathbed fighting cancer with all they have, or choosing that it's time for their story to end. The person knocked down by a bully, deciding either to stand up and fight back or conserve their strength and pull back to fight another day. Both are valid and equally important to a person's narrative. Our journey towards becoming truly superheroes does not have to begin dramatically. It can, but it doesn't have to. We may not even know that we have started on it, but we have. We all have, in our own way. As an example, who here has said hello to a stranger? Hands up. Yep, thought so. It's often said that we do not realize just how much even a simple act of kindness can affect someone's life, but it's true. You don't know what that person was going through. A kind hello may have been what they needed to get through the day. As someone who struggles with depression, it's difficult to know what is going to make or break my day. At one point, at many points, I had a day that was going horribly because of one inconsequential thing or another had triggered my downward spiral. All of a sudden, my friend linked me a funny picture, and my day was back up again, and they were my superhero for the day. Superhero dramatics do not need to be something like flying off a building to rescue someone who is plummeting to their death from the villain of the week's doomsday ray. All of you, just by showing up, have committed an act of heroism for at least one person in the room. It's me. It's heroic for me, at least. The people up at Murray Grove will get their turn, I'm sure. Being there to support someone, no matter how much you think it might not matter, can matter a lot. We're all supporting each other. The fact bears repeating. You are, to someone else, a superhero. But we cannot stop here. No matter what sort of things we think we've accomplished, no matter how hard we fight for social justice, for climate justice, for the things we feel are right and true. We cannot forget the smaller picture for the bigger picture. We cannot forget that we are heroes. We cannot forget that to grow ourselves and each other, we must take on the role of hero from time to time. We have the capacity for great change, even through the smallest of actions. We have the capacity for lifting others up. We cannot forget to use that, to cease the chanting in our protests sometimes and help up the person who's fallen by the wayside. We cannot leave out those people who need a smile or some representation. And we cannot forget that inside each one of us, there is a hero.